If you are watching this video, remember to click subscribe, share, and leave a like. I promise what you're about to hear will be unforgettable and will probably make you look at your house, the woods near your house, or the road you walk on at night in a completely different light. Because these are stories that really happened. And I still shudder when I remember them. Chapter 1. The apartment where the darkness never sleeps. This was almost 8 years ago, but I haven't stopped thinking about it for a day. I was in my early 20s, young and adventurous. I spent my weekends camping and hiking. I wasn't an expert, but I knew the basics of surviving in the woods. In the upper Idaho area where I frequented, there were plenty of black bears and grizzlies. Going there was a lot of preparation, or you were courting death. That's what made it so rare. Aside from a few tourists who got lost on the main trails, you hardly saw anyone. This time I chose a little-known path nestled on the side of a mountain. It led to a clearing overlooking the majestic mountains. I liked the quiet, and as I expected, the whole way, there was not a soul. When I arrived, the campsite was completely empty. I set up my tent at the farthest end, gathered stones to build a fire. There were still a few hours of light. I prepared leisurely, then sat down, thinking about tomorrow's journey. As the sun set, the valley was strangely quiet. I lit a fire, roasted some marshmallows, and looked up at the stars. The only sounds were the gentle wind and a few distant nighttime animals. But then, the peace was broken by footsteps. The sound of dry leaves being crushed, repeated, was clearly a human one. I looked in that direction, startled. In the flickering light of the fire, a figure appeared at the edge of the camp. A man. The darkness hid most of his face. Only the large backpack on his back was visible. He stood there looking at me, then looking around, saying nothing. Before I could say anything, he whispered softly, almost a whisper, "Sorry." His voice was so soft that I had to strain to hear it. Then he turned and walked into the darkness, in the direction he had come. I sat still. Sorry? For what? Was he looking for a campsite? But who would wander into the woods at night, then come to a stranger's camp just to whisper an apology? Uncertainty crept in, but then footsteps faded into the night. I sat back down, reassuring myself that it was probably just a lost soul. Hours passed. The fire was still burning, and I sat there, my mind in a daze. Clouds rolled in, obscuring the stars, plunging the forest into pitch darkness. At that moment, footsteps sounded again, but this time they were rapid and frantic. From the darkness, the man himself rushed out. The firelight revealed him more clearly. His beard was shaggy, his hair was matted with oil, his clothes were covered in mud. His eyes were wide open, terrified to the extreme, but his lips were pressed tightly together, showing no emotion. I stood up. "Are you okay? Are you lost? Can I help?" He interrupted in a hoarse, slow voice. "You are camping here. Why?" The strange question made me shiver. Before I could answer, his eyes glanced over my shoulder into the darkness behind. Then he looked at me again and growled, "Are you following me? Are you here, alone? Or is there someone else?" My heart was pounding. I turned around. Behind me was only the cold night forest. Not a soul. But he was still staring into space, his eyes so wide they looked like they were about to tear. And then, he whispered softly, trembling, "So, why did you go with her?" I turned around, my whole body numb. There was no one, only the deep, silent forest. When I looked back, he had changed color. His face was ashen. His eyes were still fixed on my back. Suddenly he screamed, then turned and ran straight into the darkness, following no path. I was stunned. His words still echoed in my head. "Why did you go with her?" I didn't dare sleep that night. I packed up the tent, put out the fire, then left the campsite, walking all night toward the car. Each step echoed through the forest, making my heart skip a beat. I had the feeling that, in the darkness, someone was walking alongside me. An invisible woman. The next day, I called the police. They said he must have been lost for days, hungry and paranoid. but no one could find him again. Maybe he died somewhere in the woods, maybe. Or maybe there really was a her he saw and I didn't. Second story. Just a month ago, I had another incident that haunts me to this day. That night, I stayed up all night finishing up my paperwork. To stave off sleepiness, I went to the kitchen to make some more coffee. But as soon as I got downstairs, I noticed an unusual chill in the air. The thermometer was still reading the temperature, but there was a cold breeze blowing through the living room. I checked and found the living room window wide open. I was sure I had closed it. I stood still, my heart pounding. The most terrible thought flashed through my mind. Someone had broken into the house. But when I looked closely, there was no trace of mud, no footprints. I reassured myself I must have really forgotten. I closed the door and took the coffee to the office. About half an hour later, while writing, a voice thud. A loud bang sounded right behind me, right on the wall behind my desk. I jumped up. Behind that wall was my bedroom. I opened the door and walked in, but the room was completely normal. Nothing had fallen. I began to doubt my own mind because of lack of sleep. Then, as I sat down, I suddenly remembered, behind me, outside the bedroom wall, there was a built-in wardrobe that I had long forgotten about. A small wardrobe filled with old coats. I trembled as I walked back and pulled open the closet door, and I almost fainted. In that narrow darkness, a man standing among the pile of clothes. Only a thin layer of fabric separated him from me. He stared silently, his eyes glowing in the darkness. If I had been a second slower, he would have grabbed me. I screamed and ran outside. Behind me, I heard the sound of his coat being ripped and his footsteps following. But what paralyzed me the most was that he called my name. He called my name in a hoarse, distorted voice, as if he had known me for a long time. I rushed out of the house and ran to the neighbor's house. When the police arrived, he had disappeared without a trace. That night, I realized a chilling truth. He had probably been in my house for hours, silently watching me work, hiding in the closet right behind me. If I had gone to bed as usual, I probably wouldn't be here to tell this story. Third story. Another evening, after a friend's birthday party, I was walking home. It was around 1 a.m., and the suburban streets were deserted. As I walked, a car slowly approached, the window rolled down, and a man's voice asked me if I needed a ride. I declined. The car drove away, and I breathed a sigh of relief. But a few minutes later, it appeared again, coming from the opposite direction. This time, it stopped completely at the side of the road. My heart pounded. I continued walking, pretending to be calm. The car didn't move, but it was clearly following me. I approached a path that cut through a small park. Normally, I would never have chosen it because it was pitch black and there were no streetlights. But the car was parked right in the middle of the main road. If I turned onto the path, would I avoid him or fall into the perfect trap? I gritted my teeth and decided to walk past the car. As I passed, I glanced over. The car was completely empty. The lights were still on, the engine was running, but there was no one there. Chills ran down my spine. I looked back, and that's when I saw a man's shadow standing in the trees, staring out at me. I had no choice. I ran as fast as I could. The engine roared behind me, but when I pulled out my phone to call, he changed direction, turned the car around, and drove away. The police later said it was probably a kidnapping attempt. But what scared me the most was this. If I had chosen that dark path, I would probably be lying somewhere in the woods now, with no one to find me. Chapter 2. Steps in the dark. I thought my experiences were enough to make me wary, but it turns out fate still wanted to play a joke. The next thing happened last winter, when I moved to a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. The apartment was in an old apartment building with long hallways and yellow fluorescent lights. The first night I moved in, I heard footsteps echoing from the upper floor. However, the landlord insisted that the entire floor was vacant and no one was renting it. I smiled, thinking it was probably an echo. But the longer I stayed, the more unusual it seemed. Every night at exactly 2 a.m., footsteps would be heard, slow as if someone was walking from one end of the hallway to the other, then disappearing. I tried opening the door to look out, but the hallway was empty, with only flickering lights. One night I decided to record it. I put the phone by the door and turned it on to record all night. The next morning, when I listened to it again, I was stunned. The footsteps were clear and lasted for almost 10 minutes. But then, at the end, mixed in with the footsteps, was a whisper. Very soft, but enough to make my hair stand on end. It repeated the same sentence over and over again. "You shouldn't be here." My heart stopped. I heard it over and over again, but there was no mistaking the sound. After that day, things got worse. The footsteps weren't just in the hallway anymore. I started hearing them, right in the apartment. First in the living room, then gradually, right next to the bedroom door. I locked it, but the footsteps still circled around, as if someone was waiting patiently. One night, as I was writing the script, I heard a knocking sound coming from the wall behind me. I thought it was my neighbor, but then I remembered that the wall did not border any other apartment. It only separated me from the fire escape. I was shocked to realize the knocking sound was loud. From inside the wall. That night, I couldn't sleep. At about 3 a.m., I was so tired that I lay down on the couch. In my sleep, I heard the bedroom door open. Footsteps as light as a cat approached where I was lying. I wanted to get up, but my body felt so heavy that I couldn't move. And then, right next to my ear, there was a soft voice like the whistling wind. "You heard me, right?" I woke up drenched in sweat. The room was dark, the bedroom door still closed. But on the floor, there were clear, wet footprints. A long trail from the door to the chair where I was sitting. I left the apartment the next morning without returning to collect my belongings. The landlord called to ask, and I simply said, "The upstairs floor is not really empty." Chapter 3. The 3 a.m. Call. After leaving my old apartment, I thought it was over, but it turns out the obsession still follows me, like an inescapable shadow. I rented a small room in the suburbs. The walls were painted pale yellow. The windows looked out onto the main road. The first day I moved in, I promised myself to live a healthy life. Go to bed early, wake up early, and not stay up late anymore. But perhaps once you touch things you shouldn't see, they won't forgive you. That night, around 3 a.m., my phone rang. An unknown number, no name, no area code. I hesitated for a few seconds, then picked up. There was silence on the other end. I said hello a few times, only to hear rapid breathing, very close, as if someone was pressing against the receiver. I shivered and quickly hung up. But less than a minute later, the phone rang again. The same number. I turned on the speakerphone and left it on the table, my heart pounding. The breathing sounded again, mixed with something like footsteps on the wooden floor. I was about to hang up when a hoarse whisper rang out. "You are looking out the window, right?" I was stunned. I was actually standing by the window, pulling the curtains open and looking out onto the street. I quickly stepped back, my heart pounding. The voice continued, still slowly. "Don't move, I'm right here." I rushed over, turned off the machine, and then turned it off. But the fear did not stop there. Because just a few seconds later, from outside the window, I heard 3 knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I didn't dare go near. The curtains were swaying slightly, even though the wind had died down. I gritted my teeth, gripped the small knife I had brought with me when I moved in, and opened the curtains a small crack. The street outside was completely deserted. No people, no cars. Only an old cell phone sat on the windowsill, the screen shining brightly. That was the number that had called me. I trembled, opened the window to pick it up, but as soon as I touched it, the phone automatically turned on speaker. The voice rang again, this time clearer. "I told you, don't leave the window." I was startled and threw the phone on the floor, but the screen was still on, still showing the words. "The call is in progress." That night, I didn't sleep a wink. The next morning, I brought my phone to the store to check. The staff looked at me strangely. "Are you kidding? This phone doesn't have a SIM card and can't make calls." I was speechless. I thought that was the end of it. But in the following days, even though I threw that phone away and threw it in the trash on the street, every night at exactly 3 a.m., that number would still call back. And every time it ended with a whisper, each time different. "Have you seen me? Tonight. Don't sleep. You're going to be like the others." Each time I forced myself not to pick up the phone, but the fear grew. I began to wonder, who were those previous people he mentioned? How did they disappear? And why did he choose me? One night, when I couldn't stand it anymore, I turned on the recorder, held it close to the speaker, and picked up the call. There was silence on the other end for a few seconds, then a series of ear-piercing screams like dozens of people were crying at the same time. I panicked and threw the phone into the corner of the room. But right after that, the recording ended. I played it back and there was only my voice repeating the same sentence over and over again in a choked voice. Save me. Don't make me. I swear I never said those words at that time. After that night, I unplugged all my landline phones and blocked all unknown numbers. But every time I looked in the mirror, I saw a shadowy figure behind me, standing still, faceless. I knew that the 3 a.m. call was just the beginning. Maybe something had stuck with me forever. 3 chapters, 3 layers of experience, 3 doors leading me further and further away from what is called normal. There are nights when I wonder, if I don't tell this story, will I be more at peace? Or is telling it, sharing it with you, the only way for me to lighten my burden? And perhaps if you're still listening to this, then part of this story has found its way to you. Remember to press subscribe, like, and share video, because who knows, next time you might be the one who needs to tell your story before it's too late.